The Detroit Lions 2024 season will come down to the wire. After setting franchise records, being the most dominant team in football, and being a Super Bowl favorite coming into the season, the Detroit Lions season relies on Week 18, as they will host the 13-2 Minnesota Vikings for the second time this season. And not only do these two teams play for the NFC North title, those two teams in Week 18 to close the NFL season will be playing for the number one seed in the conference. And today, we are going to take a look at that race. We're going to take a look at the remaining matchups, take a look at the remaining schedules, what both teams are dealing with right now as of injury and playing style as of late. And we're going to try to decide which team's going to take the North, which team's going to take the one seed, and which team is going to go on the road in January as the 5 seed. So, with that being said, let's take a look at this Detroit Lions roster. Let's take a look at this Minnesota roster and really just continue to take this matchup and see who will be the victor. Now, the Detroit Lions on the season are 13-2. They have the best record in the NFC. Their offense is fantastic with 6,129 total yards. They rank second in the NFL. They rank second in passing yards with 3,971, third in passing touchdowns with 37 through the air. They rank fifth in the NFL in rushing attack with 2,158 yards, with 24 touchdowns on the ground, and averaging 32.9 points per game. They are easily the best offense in football right now. They score the most points. They have some of the most yardage, and very few offenses stack up to the Detroit Lions in every single category. Now, with 2 weeks left in the NFL season, the Detroit Lions have an uphill battle. They go on the road next week to the 6-9 San Francisco 49ers, a team that currently resides in the basement of the NFC West, but just a season ago met the Detroit Lions in a battle for the NFC Championship. With the Super Bowl on the line, the San Francisco 49ers bested the Detroit Lions, represented the NFC North, and unfortunately lost in the Super Bowl. So the Lions will go on the road looking for revenge in that matchup, and then will come back home in Week 18 to take on this all-encompassing matchup of the 13-2 Vikings, a team that has ailed the Detroit Lions all season, a team that was expected to be a 6-win bottom-dwelling team, is now in position to not only take the North, but to take the number one seed, get a bye in the playoffs, and be set up for success moving forward. Now, playoff scenarios. The Detroit Lions have made the playoffs. They clinched the playoffs over a month ago and were the first team to do so in the NFL. The scenarios for NFC North champions, well, if the Detroit Lions win in San Francisco and win in Minnesota, they will take the victory. They will be crowned NFC North champions for the second season in a row and will have a guaranteed bye week in the NFL playoffs. The other scenario for this to happen, if the Detroit Lions beat the San Francisco 49ers this weekend, in which they are 3.5-point favorites already, and the Minnesota Vikings lose to Green Bay at home, the Detroit Lions will be crowned champions in one seed again. Basically, the season comes down to the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings having the same record. The Lions will hold all of the tiebreakers, meaning as long as the Lions and the Vikings have the same record, the Lions will prevail. And that's what it comes down to. That is the season. The Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings are two of the best teams in football. The Lions have been the most dominant team in football, and the Minnesota Vikings have been the underdogs. They've been the Cinderella story. And yeah, they've won a lot of close games. They've won a lot of games that maybe relied on a little bit of luck, maybe relied on a few turnovers. Maybe they shouldn't have won, but they did. And they are a very good football team. This is not the same football team as that 2022 team that had a negative point differential. Minnesota Vikings are third in the NFC in point differential. They are a very, very strong, very competent football team, and they will give the Detroit Lions a run for their money in Week 18. The question is, will that game matter? Well, taking a look at the Detroit Lions as of recent form, of course, last week and just a few days ago, the Detroit Lions had a massive dominant victory over the Chicago Bears with a 34-17 scoreline. Jared Goff was fantastic. 23 of 32, 336 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, in his first real game without David Montgomery this season, had 23 carries, 109 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Jameson Williams had arguably his best day as a pro with 5 receptions, 143 yards and a touchdown through the air, including an 83-yard bomb from Jared Goff, perfectly hitting Jameson Williams in stride. JMO catching it, taking it to the house for the first time really in their careers together. They finally connected on that deep shot, and it resulted in a touchdown. St. Brown had a good day as well. 6 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown through the air. They were pretty good, but I think the big takeaway from this game is the defensive side of the ball. The Lions forced 2 turnovers, 2 fumbles in the first quarter, helped them jump out to a really big lead early, 2 sacks on the quarterback, and could have been many more. Caleb Williams is one of the best quarterbacks when it comes to escaping pressure, breaking tackles, and breaking contain. The Detroit Lions let him out a couple of times, but 2 sacks on the quarterback was pretty good to see. Only 17 points allowed after back-to-back weeks of allowing 30-plus points is a fantastic upgrade for the Detroit Lions. They allowed just 3 points in the second half, which was really nice to see again, and the secondary had a new look. With Ifeatu Melifonwu's return, him and Kirby Joseph played safety, while Brian Branch played in the slot with Terrion Arnold and Amik Robertson on the outside. And while there were a couple of growing pains, I thought overall the secondary looked quite well. They did allow 2 touchdowns, but didn't allow too many big plays over the top, had a couple key pass breakups. And overall, I thought adding Melifonwu back to the roster allowed the Lions to blitz a little bit more effectively, cover a little bit more effectively. And overall, you could see the difference that it made for the defense. He played some linebacker, he played some safety. They moved him around, they moved Branch around, they moved all kinds of players in and out of the lineup, and it led to more versatility, and I think it led to a better product on the field. Some of the standouts from that Chicago Bears game, as I said, Jameson Williams with his 5 catches, 143 yards, and a touchdown. Brian Branch playing back in the slot again, totaled 12 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a pass defended. Jahmyr Gibbs on the offense, again, first time without David Montgomery this season, topped 100 rushing yards, and I believe topped 140 scrimmage yards with a touchdown and a score. Ifeatu Melifonwu in his seasonal debut had 4 tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss. He was a great blitzer. Could have had 2 sacks on the day, but Caleb Williams was able to escape from the first one in the first quarter. I thought Ifeatu added a lot to this defense. He's a player that I know the Lions coaching staff has been waiting for many, many weeks. The Lions finally have their playmaking safety back in the secondary. As we always do, we're going to talk about injuries next. The Detroit Lions have been devastated by injuries with so many massive players, so many key contributors, so many key starters no longer with the Detroit Lions starting on defense. They have allowed a lot of points recently, but we all saw the difference that it made adding Ifeatu Melifonwu back to this roster. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, the starting linebacker from a season ago, an all-pro special teamer from last season, has had his official practice clock start, which means he could potentially return for the San Francisco game, giving the Lions a massive boost, not only on special teams, but in the linebacking core as a blitzer and a coverage guy. Ennis Rakestraw Jr. was talked about last week as potentially returning soon, but not quite being ready enough for week 16. We could see his clock start this week and have him be ready for week 17, if not week 18. Alex Anzalone is expected to return for week 18 versus the Minnesota Vikings if that game is relevant. And we have an update on David Montgomery, who is expected to return for the divisional round if the Detroit Lions do make it as far. So the Lions are starting to get a little bit healthy. They're starting to have some players return. The linebacking core upgrades with Jalen Reeves-Maybin would be a massive gain for this Lions defense. Ennis Rakestraw would add some great secondary depth. And of course, Alex Anzalone would give the Detroit Lions their top 2 linebackers back. They would have Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Trevor Nowaske as the 3 and 4 and go into the playoffs with their best linebacking core since week 12 when they lost Anzalone to the Jacksonville Jaguars. With that being said, that is kind of where the Lions are right now. They are a team that are starting to get hot again. They just dominated a divisional rival on the road in the cold. With a win next weekend, they could potentially take the North. They could potentially take the 1 seed, making week 18 irrelevant. But with that being said, it's all going to come down to what Minnesota does. Next week essentially doesn't matter for the Lions. If they lose in San Francisco, doesn't really matter. They can still go into week 18 and find victory. If they win this week and Minnesota wins, this week still doesn't really matter. It's all going to come down to week 18 unless the Packers upset the Vikings. So with that being said, we will of course follow that a little bit more in depth as it gets closer, but that's where we stand right now. This race to the 1 seed is coming down to the wire. Most teams have their playoff set. Many teams have won their conference and their division, but the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings will continue to battle, continue to fight. And I think week 18 will be one of the best games of football that we have seen in a long time. But with that being said, that is life for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below your expectations for the next few weeks, your expectations for week 18. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.